I was claimed by a Skinwalker by Bloodhunter62. I'm Jake, a 22-year-old male currently attending Clemson University in Clemson, South Carolina. Seeing as it's my last year in uni before I graduate, my friends and I planned a camping trip for the last week of school. The hardest part was fitting everyone into my Jeep, but we managed. "What the hell is that, Chase?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "A blunt, duh." Chase was the stoner of our group, because every group just has to have one. He was a chubby, little white boy, about 5'8", with brown hair pulled up in a bun, and just enough chin hair to look like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. "Damn it, man, you're not gonna hotbox my car," I exclaimed. I would shake my head in disbelief if I wasn't so used to it. "I agree with Jakey. At least save it for when we get there," Blair chimed in. Blair was the most playful one in the group, at least around me. She was about 5'6", with fair skin, long red hair, light freckles around the bridge of her nose, and bright green eyes. "Thanks, Blair," I said with a sigh of relief. She smiled at me, and then went back to playing whatever choose-your-own-adventure game she had recently installed. We didn't even make it another 5 minutes without another argument in the back seat. I let out another sigh. It's gonna be a long week. When we arrived at the forest, I made sure to do a head count in case we lost someone at the rest stop. Okay, there's Blair and Chase, staying as far away as possible from each other. Then there's Aljo. Aljo is a really muscular guy with dark skin who stands around 6'2". He was sporting a dark, high-top hairstyle and a well-maintained beard. And there's Corey, by far the nicest person in the group. Corey stood at 5'3", had caramel-colored skin, and curly brown hair that framed her face nicely. "So, Jake, what are we waiting for?" she asked in the nicest way possible. "Let's go enjoy the great outdoors." I half expected her to end up singing to the little woodland creatures on our way there. No point in delaying it any longer, I guess. While we were scouting the forest for a good campsite, I felt strangely calm. There's just something about being in the woods that feels so serene. The birds sing their sweet songs as the sunlight reflects through the beads of dew on the leaves. It's just so relaxing. However, my moment of peace was interrupted. Something was off. It was just enough for you to notice it, but not enough to pinpoint. I stopped walking and concentrated on finding the source of my unease. After a few moments, my ears caught it. One bird was out of sync. All the other birds were singing in perfect unison, but this little guy, he was half a beat behind. No one else seemed to notice it, so I just kept walking. I still thought it was a bit weird, but oh well. The little guy was probably still learning. When we finally found a site we could all agree on, it was almost dark. Chase and Corey started to build a campfire, while Blair and Aljo and I began to assemble the tents. "So, Jake," Aljo began, "you brought the arrows, right?" "Of course. Did you bring the bow?" I responded. Instead of responding, he simply tossed the bow my way. I grabbed it and tested the drawstring. It felt nice and strong, tight but reflexive. It was a beautiful maplewood bow, gifted to Aljo by the Navajo tribe we had met a few years back in Utah. I set it down near his tent and got to work helping Blair set ours up. "Here, let me get that for you," I said as I hammered down the tent spike. "Thanks, Jakey," she said with a smile. "I'll go get our bags." Before she could take another step towards the car, Chase showed up in front of her. "I'll go with you then," he said with the creepiest wink I've ever seen. He has a really punchable face, I thought. "How about you just go and get them by yourself?" Blair retorted with a wink of her own. Chase sighed in defeat. and then started off towards the car. While Chase was getting our bags from the car, the rest of us sat around the campfire. Corey was talking to Aljo with a bright smile on her face, as usual. I heard something about it being a nice night for s'mores before I was reminded of the redhead sitting next to me. "So, Jakey, are you ready to spend the whole week with us?" Blair asked playfully. She said us, but I knew more or less she was really asking if I was ready to spend the week with her. "There's no one I'd rather be stuck with," I replied with a wink. Her eyes lit up at this, and her smile grew wider, making me wonder what I've just got myself into. She then grabs my wrist and yanks me towards her tent. Blair, are you sure this is the best time for this?" I asked hesitantly. "Oh, shut up, Jakey." She pulled me into the tent and zipped away my view of Aljo giving me a thumbs up and Corey just staring innocently, wondering what was going on. I turned around to find Blair, tablet in hand. She held it up to me and told me to choose a game. Well, this isn't what I thought was gonna happen. I tapped on the one called Not Much Time, and I sat down on the tent floor. Blair sat next to me, with her head on my shoulder, and we alternated choices in the game. Apparently, this one was about someone who'd suddenly had the power to stop time. My first choice was whether to use my powers to help someone, steal from someone, hurt someone, or just restart time. I decided to help someone. "Aw, but that's so boring, Jakey," Blair whined. She, of course, used her choice to hurt someone the next time we played. We ended up replaying the game 5 more times before we both fell asleep. When I woke up, I could see rays of sunlight peeking in through the small holes in the tent. My right arm was still asleep, so I went to move it, but I couldn't. And I looked over to find Blair hugging my arm like a teddy bear. I let out a sigh and gently freed my arm from her death grip. I then noticed the dead tablet on the floor, so I plugged it into the charger. I unzipped the tent and walked out into the fresh pine-scented air. I thought I was the first one awake, but that thought was shattered when I noticed smoke coming out of Chase's tent. Really? This early in the morning? I thought to myself. I relit our campfire and boiled some water for some oatmeal. I made sure I had enough for everyone and I poured the packs in. In a few minutes, I had 2 bowls of oatmeal and headed back to Blair's tent. "Hey Blair, I made breakfast." She was still asleep. "Hey dummy, I got something for you," I said as I nudged her with my foot. She whined about not wanting to go back to school today and tried to go back to sleep. I sighed and then put the bowl down in front of her face. She, like a dog, sniffed it a little and then opened her eyes. "Oh, hey Jakey," she said as I rolled my eyes. I sat down next to her and ate my oatmeal. Well, I guess it could be worse, I thought to myself. Throughout the day, we each did various chores around the camp. Blair and Corey decorated everyone's tents. Chase got wood for the fire, and Aljo and I went hunting. Aljo was more familiar with the bow than I was, so I was wielding my hunting knife. The knife was a 6-inch Bowie knife, made for an easy kill up close, while Aljo was our ranged predator. So far, all we'd seen were rabbit and deer tracks, but none of the animals that have left them. We set up some snares for the rabbits, and then decided it would be best to set up an outpost in the trees, that way the deer could come to us. We found a decent-sized tree and climbed up to wait in the branches. While we were waiting on our prey, Aljo was dead silent. I felt calm and focused, like I was a born predator on the hunt. However, this feeling was quickly shattered, leaving only unease in its wake. My eyes scoured the forest floor for something, anything out of place. And that's when I saw it. There was a single deer gazing on the dew-covered blades of grass. As it gadded to another patch of grass, I studied it for abnormalities. The problem was easy to identify, as the deer walked differently from any other deer I've ever seen. Its steps were janky, almost uncertain, as if it thought the floor might give out from beneath it. It would tap the ground with its front hoof in one spot and then stomp the same hoof down in front of it, foot away from where it tapped before. As it did this, it was also making noise. It sounded almost like a low growl. Now, maybe there's an explanation for its lurching steps, but I know for certain that deer don't growl. As I thought this, the deer's head suddenly jerked up towards me and Aljo. My breath caught in my throat, and my heart lurched just as violently as the deer had stomped. The deer, no, the demon, was now gazing into my very soul with its bright yellow eyes. I couldn't bring myself to look away. That is, until Aljo fired an arrow into that damn thing. The thing let out the most blood-curdling screech I've ever heard before or since then. It took off into the bushes, and we got the hell out of that tree. Later that night, we were chilling by the campfire, eating some s'mores. Corey and Aljo were talking again, and really seemed to be hitting it off. I smiled at the thought of my two best friends being happy together, and they certainly deserved it. Chase had gone into the woods to take a leak, and should be getting back any time now. I then started thinking about that deer again. What was that thing? It couldn't have been a deer. I'll try to keep them all I was broken out of my thoughts by a small hand gripping mine. I looked to my right to find Blair smiling at me. "What you thinking about, Jakey?" she asked in her usual playful tone. "Just how good these s'mores are," I said with excitement. "Thanks for bringing the chocolate." She laughed and punched my arm. "You're a bad liar, you know that, Jakey?" she teased me. "No, really, these are great, babe," I replied in between bites. She laughed again and rested her head on my shoulder. We were all laughing about some embarrassing memories of Chase when we heard an ear-piercing screech. My heart threatened to jump out of my chest and into the fire. It was the same screech that deer had made earlier that day. Aljo and I shared a glance and then jumped into action. I grabbed my blade, and he grabbed his bow with quiver of arrows. We were just about to head out to find Chase when Blair grabbed my hand and looked straight into my eyes. She didn't need to say anything for me to know that she was scared. I looked over at Aljo and only received a nod in response. He headed out while I sat back down with Blair and Corey. He was capable of handling this on his own, and I couldn't just leave Blair and Corey defenseless. I gripped my knife tighter and tighter as the minutes turned into hours just waiting for Chase or Aljo to return. Blair tried to calm me down and assured me everything would be okay. But I just knew neither of us really believed that. As the sun's light began to cut through the trees, Chase walked back into camp. I jumped up and rushed towards him. He looked towards me, and my steps seemed to falter. For a split second, I thought I saw yellow eyes staring at me from his baggy, sunken-in orbitals. I blinked, and then they were back to his normal, stormy gray eyes. "Man, I'm going crazy, aren't I?" I thought to myself. "Where have you been?" I asked in a more panicked tone than I meant to use. "Taking a leak," he said. I thought there was something wrong with his voice, but then it was back to normal so quick that I just brushed it off as me going crazy again. Blair came over to my side and asked Chase some questions, but he seemed to be normal Chase. Corey, however, stayed by the now dying campfire. "Where's Aljo?" she asked, fear weighing heavily in her voice. "I don't know," Chase responded, with that weird tone again. I made a mental note to remember that tone shift. Corey took a stumbling step backwards. "I don't believe you!" she screamed at him. This wasn't like her at all. What happened to the sweet little woman who's always smiling? I thought. Chase took a lurching step towards her, and I instinctively moved between the two of them. gripping my knife with white knuckles. I'd seen that type of movement before. He looked at me, up and down, and then walked to his tent. Something is very wrong here, I thought to myself. Blair and I spent the rest of the day trying to comfort Corey in any and every way we could think of. We made her some more s'mores, gave her a shoulder massage, played games with her on Blair's tablet, but none of it worked. She just kept insisting that I go look for Aljo. I really wanted to. I really did, but I couldn't just leave them with Chase. There's something just so off about him, and I couldn't trust him. It was almost sundown, and Blair was cooking a rabbit over the fire. The sky was a deep pink, and the clouds looked blue against it, making it look like a giant sheet of cotton candy. When Blair was done making dinner, I walked to the door of Chase's tent and reluctantly called out, "Dinner's ready." No response. I tried again. Still, no response. My patience was wearing thin, so I unzipped the door to his tent. I looked inside, surprised at what I found. Rather, surprised at the lack thereof. Chase was gone, and there was this huge hole in the back of his tent. I had suddenly lost my appetite. The girls ate dinner, and then we decided to catch up on some much-needed sleep, and just wait for Aljo and Chase to come back. Blair and I went to our tent, and Corey went to hers. We zip-shut our door, and crawled into our sleeping bags. Blair snuggled up next to me as I drifted off to sleep. I was awoken by the sound of screeching that sent shivers down my spine and chilled my blood cold. I bolted upright and unzipped the tent door, rushing out into the cold night air. The moon was like a resplendent glacier, gleaming as rays of sunlight danced through its icy core. I could see clearly in the night, even without the fire, and I rushed over to Corey's tent to see if she was all right. What I found almost made me collapse. Her tent was empty, and in the back there was a gaping hole exposing the forest on the other side. I found my knife and sheathed it to my hip. I made way to leave when Blair stepped in front of me. "You aren't going out alone. I'm coming with you," she said. Who am I to stop her? I told her to stay close to me, and we then started off into the forest. My heart was racing inside my chest. It was telling me to get out and escape this goddamn forest. I dashed through the brush on the forest floor, running for my goddamn life. I'd just lost Blair a few minutes ago, but as much as I willed myself to go back for her, my body wouldn't stop running. I was in fight or flight mode, and I had subconsciously chosen to flight. I just kept running until I came face to face with Aljo. At first, I was relieved to see him until I realized he wasn't blinking. In fact, he had no eyes. Oh, God. His cheeks were torn into a permanent smile. His eyeballs were gouged out, and his ears were ripped off, leaving only bloody holes on the side of his head. I looked down at his body. His right pec had been cut off, exposing his ribcage underneath, his gut agape, with his innards spilling out like never-ending rope that a clown would use in a talent show. I immediately turned to run to my left, but was met with the body of Chase in a similar state of that of Aljo. I stumbled backwards and turned to run the other way, but then was met with Corey's body, and what was done to her I won't even describe. I already have to see it enough every night in my dreams. I crumbled to my knees, and I threw up what little I had in my stomach. That was when I heard a familiar voice. "Oh, Jakey, you almost got away." I tried to crawl away, and I was kicked hard in the ribs. I rolled onto my back, gasping for air and begging for mercy. Blair slammed a knee down onto my chest, and then thrust an arrow through my cheek. I howled in pain as the blood flowed down my throat. My lungs burned for oxygen as I began to drown in my own blood. Blair realizes this, and grips the arrow in my cheek, using it to turn me on my side. She couldn't let me die now. She wanted to make me suffer. She tore the arrow from my face, leaving a bloody hole in my face. She rolled me onto my back and plunged the arrow into my chest and ripped it down to my gut, exposing my innards. She proceeds to carve out my gut until she could freely peel off the skin and fat, leaving only muscle exposed. She then stuck an arrow into my eye and began clawing at the exposed muscle of my abs. Every fucking second was enough pain to make me wish I was dead, but I just needed to grab my knife. She grabbed the arrow again and carved Nalyehi, the Navajo word for property, into my right pec. I felt the cold, bone mold handle of my blade and gripped it tightly. I brought it up to her eye and dragged it down the side of her face. She recoiled off me and let out an all too familiar screech and took off into the night. I was found by the other campers a few minutes later, unconscious from the loss of blood. They had me helicoptered to the nearest hospital. The doctors began surgery right away and miraculously saved my life. You can't trust anyone. I learned the hard way. Once you trust someone, you become their property. I know because the scars will never fade. The memories will never fade. My pain will never fucking fade, and I will always be that thing's property. Hey guys, that concludes part 1 of I Was Claimed by a Skinwalker, and I hope you enjoyed the story because I'm really getting into it now. I hope you all had a really great Happy New Year and are ready to leave 2019 behind us, because I know me and my significant other had a shitty 2019, and I'm sure a lot of other people did too. So let's bring in the new year, 2020, and hope that it's a really good year. You know, set some new goals for yourself. Don't just be cliche and be like, I want to go to the gym, or, you know, I'm gonna, eat healthy. Like, no. Let's do something you want to do for you. Like a hobby, something you've always wanted to try that's different from normal. Let's have 2020 be the year of self-discovery, is what I'm going to call it. So, again, Happy New Year, everybody, and I'll see you next time on the next video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that bell button if you want to hear more from me. And just wait, because I'm already working on part 2, and it's a doozy of a story, so just get ready. Grab a beer, do whatever you need to do to prepare, so let's make it more enjoyable for yourself. But I'll see you next time. Bye for now.